Dan Myers here to tell you about State Farm Insurance agents Eric Means in Shakopee and Andy Hedlund in Rogers. When it comes to hockey talk, Gorgie and I have you covered. And when it comes to ensuring what is most important to you, Eric and Andy are the very best in the business. Both of these guys are hockey guys. Meansy, he played for the Gophers, while Heads, he played college hockey in Mankato for the Mavericks. Hashtag horns up. Meansy is my State Farm agent, and even though I live on the wrong side of the river, he's able to take care of all my home and auto insurance needs. So if you're like me and you live in that state to the east, yikes. Or maybe you live in Minnesota and you have a lake, home, or property in Wisconsin, call Eric Means in Shakopee and have him take care of you as well. 952-446-7067. That's 952-446-7067. Maybe you're a North Metro guy or gal and want to work with Andy Hedlund out of Rogers. That's okay too. Give him a call. 763-QUOTE-IT is the number. 763-786-8348. Or check him out online at thehockeyagent.com. That's State Farm Insurance and agents Eric Means and Andy Hedlund. Two guys that take care of us, and they'll take good care of you as well. Hello and welcome again to the Sieve and the Scribe podcast presented by Minnesota Hockey Magazine and State Farm Insurance agents Eric Means in Shakopee and Andy Hedlund in Rogers. I am Dan Myers from Wild.com and my partner in crime, as always, Kevin Gorg. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Good to be with you guys. Dan, it's the halfway point of the hockey season, so I thought it's a perfect time to check in with one of our very favorites in our traveling party with the Minnesota Wild, and I'll let you introduce our special guest, but this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, right off the hop today, let's get right into it with the voice of Wild hockey, at least on the radio. And hey, you know what? Screw Panther. The voice of Wild hockey, Joe O'Donnell from the Wild Radio Network. Hi, Joe. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, fellas. You could throw part-time in there if you want.
Well, that's pretty much been your MO. Mr. Everything, Joe O'Donnell.
I've made a career on being part-time.
Well, you jumped on at the right time. You got a pretty good team to follow right now.
Yeah,
your timing is perfect. And I know Bob Kurtz is a Hall of Famer, and at some point he's going to fade off into the sunset and hand over the mic full-time to you. But to get here this year and kind of start the journey as an NHL broadcaster, we think full-time very soon. What are your observations of the team that you're covering?
So much fun. It really has been a pleasure. Every night this team not only is in the game, they're scoring 3 or 4 goals, and they make it look easy at times. But just the vibe around the room from day one of camp to the way this team started the season, really only one sort of valley, if you will, throughout what is usually a roller coaster type year. I mean, you're at the midway point now, 41 games in. There's been one, what you might call skid. And other than that, this team has been just outstanding. And again, the goal scoring, the creativity offensively, the speed, the pace, the way they just seem to like each other genuinely from the top down. It's been just an absolute thrill. And I think the fans are seeing that as well. Like, there aren't a lot of people around this area, this state of hockey, and nationally, I think as well, that, you know, the Minnesota Wild are on the map now. And I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
Isn't it amazing when you think back to that time around the Winter Classic when the Wild was mired in, a losing streak, and that was coming on the heels of a 9-game point streak where the team went 8-0-1, and it seemed like, in typical Minnesota fan, I know you're not, you're just, becoming a part of this Minnesota fandom now. Joe, Kevin, and I have been a part of this our entire lives, basically, where you're just waiting for the impending doom. You're waiting for the other shoe to fall. And during that losing streak, there were so many fans out there that said, "Oh, well, here we go. Here's the part in the season we've been waiting for. The Wild, just not a threat in the Western Conference this year." I think the most impressive part has been the response since that 5-game losing streak, rattling off 10 games in a row here with points, 9-0-1 during that stretch, and looking like an absolute wagon in the process.
It's a great point, because the cliche is every team goes through it, right? Like, you're going to hit that rut. They had the Russo curse they had to fight through. As Russo said, they were the best team in the NHL, and then they immediately they immediately tanked there for a week and a half. But yeah, I just look again. I come back to just what a good group this is to be around and how they embrace the team mentality. I mean, you think about the game they won in Boston, which was as much of a must-win game as they've had. On the heels of the Winter Classic loss, winless in 5 or whatever it was. They go into Boston. They're a little shorthanded. Capo Kakinen's in net, not your number one goaltender. And they went on the road, Matt Boldy's debut. Then they come home to play the Caps, who are an absolute, at that point, bona fide contender. And they're missing 9 regulars. And they win that game at home after trailing 2-0. They get sparked by that own goal that the Caps threw into their own net, and they never look back. And Matt Boldy now, by the way, has not lost a game in regulation in his NHL career, so he's got to be loving the NHL. But I just think this is a team that they're just so much fun to watch and be around, and they have that it factor. And when you've got that, doesn't matter who's in the lineup. You're not looking around for answers. You're not waiting for the next player to come in and step up and do the job. The guys that are in the lineup are getting the job done.
Kevin, before your next question, I just want to say, you mentioned the Russo curse. I don't know if anyone saw the headline from Russo's post-game story last night. At midseason, the Wild have earned their spot among the NHL's elite and high expectations to go with it. So if this thing goes completely pear-shaped post-All-Star break, once again, we can blame the Athletics' Michael Russo. Kevin, go ahead.
Well, we're going to get back to all the great vibes and storylines around the Minnesota Wild, and I'm certain a lot of the hockey fans that are joining us on the Sieve and the Scribe here today have heard you before, have heard you call a game, know what a pro you are, know how good you are, and the enthusiasm you bring. But for those that are not able to be in that circle of friendship with you, which Dan and I are very lucky to be, tell the folks where you grew up and when, at what age did you think that, broadcasting might be something I want to do?
Well, it's an interesting question because Dan just mentioned the other shoe dropping and that inevitable doom and gloom. Growing up outside of Philadelphia, I know all about a fan base that's jaded because they're used to not having success. I'm 42 years old now. I have seen 2 championships from my beloved Philly teams, and one of them was, very recent. So I understand what the Minnesota fan base feels like they are going through at times because I've lived it for so long. But to answer your question, Kevin, growing up outside Philadelphia, loving hockey, playing a lot of street hockey and eventually ice hockey as a kid. But I wasn't a very good player. And I think I always knew that, as a big SportsCenter fan, I went to school for communications because I think, as a sports guy and just loving that part of things, I think it was just a natural major for me. Like, it wasn't going to be math or economics or business, right? Like, this is not my forte. So I went to the radio station at the University of Delaware freshman year, like one of the first days, like when they have orientation. And it was like one of those settings where every group or outlet has a table. And I found the radio station table and I was like, I want to call hockey games. And they were legitimately like, all right, we'll show up Friday night. So I rode my bike from the dorm to the hockey rink. It's in 1998. And I kind of observed for a bit. I took the radio station test so that I was approved to be on air. And then I jumped into the rotation, starting doing color analysis and sort of waiting for my opportunity as other folks graduated ahead of me to get a chance to call games. It was club hockey, ACHA Division I club for University of Delaware Blue Hens. And that really got my start. And from there, I did things to make money, but I was always had a focus on trying to get into hockey and eventually call games in the NHL. That's been my goal since, 1998, 1997, somewhere in there as I got to college in 98 and started to realize, like, this is what I want to do. Didn't know if I'd be able to get there, but I was sure hell-bent on trying.
The fun part about that journey and hearing that story is I hear so much of my own journey in there. And Kevin, I know your journey, we all have different journeys and how we got here. That was, when hearing you talk about like going there on orientation day and being like, I want to go do this. That's exactly what I did at the school newspaper at Minnesota State. I showed up. I said, I want to do this. They said, all right, be here. And lo and behold, 20 years down the line, you get to live out your dream. Joe,
what's crazy though, guys, real quick, is that Brian Smith was the sports director at the school radio station at the time, WVUD. And Brian Smith is the PR guy for the Flyers now. He's like their number 2 PR guy. And so I still keep in touch with him. When I was doing color, he was calling games in 1998 and 1999 before he graduated. So it's such a small circle still that I still have contacts at the University of Delaware and the radio station there, because it was just such a good spot for me, because I don't want to say this, the student body was apathetic, but there weren't, had I gone to Syracuse, there had been 100 kids in Joe O'Donnell's boat trying to call games, fighting to call a basketball game or a field hockey match or whatever. At Delaware, they were like, do you want to try basketball? Like, we need somebody to do lacrosse. And I wasn't really interested in that stuff. Like, I wanted to enjoy my time at school and sort of sprinkle in the hockey around it. So I didn't live and die at the radio station, but I got great hands-on experience, which allowed me to realize something I wanted to do, something I thought I was at least okay at, and gave me that good experience where, had I gone to a powerhouse communications college, who knows where I'd be right now.
This is the Sieve and the Scribe, presented by Minnesota Hockey Magazine and State Farm Insurance. Agents Eric Means and Andy Hedlund. Joe O'Donnell of Wild Radio is our guest. And Joe, you know, when you talk about that journey, when you kind of speak it out loud there, do you remember the feeling you had when you signed that contract earlier this year that said, I've arrived, you know, I finally arrived after 20 years, 25 years after setting this goal of wanting to get to the NHL, of getting here? You remember what that feeling was like? What was it like? And then, other than your wife, Kara, who's an absolute saint, and we can talk about her more in a little bit, like, who was your first phone call to say, hey, I did this, thank you?
I remember, because it wasn't that long ago, I FaceTimed my parents, and they knew the process was going on and such, but I kind of just checked in with them. I was packing up my last belongings from the Iowa Wild office. I printed the agreement, signed it and sent it back, and I just FaceTimed them to let them know it was official. Obviously, Kara was involved the entire time as the process was moving along. A few other people that kind of knew, but for the most part, I didn't want to put the cart before the horse, and I didn't want too many people to know that it was a done deal until it was actually a done deal, if that makes sense. But the other really big moment for me, guys, was that first regular season NHL game. The preseason game in Des Moines was cool, but it felt like it was a preseason game, and I didn't want to count that essentially on my resume. But that first game in Anaheim a couple of years ago, when Bob Kurtz first scaled back his travel, I did that 4-game trip. But that first game in Honda Center, you could have literally, taken me out back and shot me afterwards, and I would have died a happy man. Like, I wanted to get to that broadcast. The days leading up to it, it's like, don't go play in traffic today, because I got to make this NHL debut, because I just, honestly, I had put in so much time in the minors, and the goal was getting closer. The dream was becoming more of a reality. But that first game in Anaheim a couple of years back was a really, really special moment for me. A little nervous, a little emotional going into it, but it was awesome. Working with Tom Reed's great. And but yeah, there have been a couple of highlights along the way of, you talk about, I don't know, 1,300 or some hockey broadcasts I've done professionally now. And those are some of the bigger moments, obviously.
Kevin, what do you remember about your NHL debut?
I remember, ironically, it was in Anaheim, and Josh Harding was in goal. And it was my first time on the road with the NHL team. And, because I was a former goalie, had a couple things drawn up in our pregame meetings and our conference call revolving around Harding. And I'm like, well, at that point, he was very unproven. I mean, this is going back, 15 years in the time machine right now. And I had seen a couple things in practice. I'd had a conversation with Bob Mason, our old goalie coach, who was fantastic. And I had a strong opinion that Josh was sitting on not only a big start in Anaheim, but was sitting on a decent season in front of him. And like I said at the time, he was very, very unproven. And he was a left-hander. And I grew up a left-handed goalie, something you don't see very often. And I'll never forget it, because at this point now, it's my first time on the road. I've done the hit, on the first commercial break, under 14 in the first period. And now I'm like, one of Josh's relatives. Like, I'm nervous. Like, I'm legitimately bought into this start needing to be good. And it ended up being a 2-0 Wild win. He played great, had nothing to do with me. But it was a rush. To Joe's point, I walked out of that building that night thinking, all the high school games I had done on radio and local TV, and my parents would call and say, when can we watch you and Anthony call the game? Well, it's tape delayed at 2:00 in the morning on channel 13. And, here I was doing an NHL game. I was on the glass at the Honda Center, and I'm like, my God, what a moment for me. And honestly, all the work that had been put in behind the scenes, all the support from my parents and my family and my friends. And it's like, it hits you. And I think when Joe spoke of his first game, it reminded me of that journey as well.
Yeah, it's a special journey. I remember mine, the first one with the Wild was in St. Louis at the old Scott Trade Center, now the Enterprise Center. Just being an absolute blur and trying not to screw up. Like, where am I allowed to go? When am I allowed to be there? Like, what's the etiquette at the hotel? All that stuff. And, something I'll always remember, I still have it, waiting for the post-game scrum in the tunnel downstairs. And Matt Benz came out and flipped me a puck. He said, congrats on your first game. And so I still have that. I have it with my little press pass from the first one. I have a little first NHL game type thing. So that we always remember the first one, guys, right? Like that was, it's amazing. You look at the journey that all of us took to get here, and now we're here and we're all together. And we're here together on the Sieve and the Scribe, and it's very emotional. Kevin?
Well, Joe, I think, I get questions all the time. It's one of the great honors of being in the positions that we're in. We're on that charter plane. We're with an NHL team. It's a dream come true. And so you run into high school and college students all the time that ask, how do I do this? How do I get into that position? And so I think it's great right now that there are more outlets than there were 25, 30 years ago when we were starting our journey. But, I think with that, I think people have to understand that the journey isn't always easier just because there's more outlets. And I want people to know, for your journey specifically, the biggest stepping stone and opportunity you had was clearly with the Iowa Wild. And I have to be honest, getting to know you the last couple of years through Dan, I was blown away by the work that you put in with the Iowa Wild. I literally need you to kind of go over the duties that you performed when you were not only the play-by-play guy for the Iowa Wild, you were the color guy, and you were 18 other guys. And I think it's important for young broadcasters out there to understand that it's awesome when you get here, but there's a lot of work that it takes to get to this spot when you finally arrive.
Yeah, here we go, Mr. Everything. Tell us all about it.
It's something that I would, if I was giving advice to an aspiring broadcaster, I would say a couple of things. One is get your reps. You have to have that hands-on experience. So if that means taking a tape recorder, well, in this case, they're all digital now. I'm dating myself, and sitting in a press box or in the stands somewhere in a partially vacated arena and calling the game, I would do it. I've done it. Sitting in the old Spectrum press box, watching Philadelphia Phantoms games back in 2003 and 4. I sat there with my mini disc recorder and I did my best to try and call the action. And I would also say, don't worry about the names. Everybody could be Smith, Jones, and Johnson. It doesn't matter. Where's the puck? Who's got the puck? Sort of that stuff. So that would be my very short 60-second, get your reps and focus on where the puck is if you're trying to learn how to call hockey games. And then the other thing I'd say, and I learned this my first year in pro hockey full-time was in Boise, Idaho with the Idaho Steelheads of the ECHL. I got there at the end of the 04-05 season. I finished the year. Their broadcaster had quit mid-season, which never happens. Well, almost never happens. So I was literally, that was my break. I was collecting bills on the telephone as my day job. I was working Reading Royals home games as an intern to try and just stay in the business and network and get a couple of games a year to get some tape. But when I got to Boise, that was my big break. And the team president there, Eric Trapp, I respect the hell out of him. He taught me you have to sell. Like, I didn't go there and just call games or just do PR. I was going to sell. And honestly, you're not making a lot of money, so you better sell. So I learned quickly in this business, especially at the minor league level, that revenue is king, that cash is king, And the more you can sell and bring in, the more value you have. So I learned from a very young age in the business that you were going to do more than just broadcast games. And that was with me for 16 years in minor league hockey. You know, I sold every step of the way. Every single season I was in the minor leagues, whether it was the ECHL or the American League, I sold corporate sales. I would sell season tickets earlier in my career, suites, you name it. And that was a way to make more money and a way to be a bigger part of the picture for the organization. So eventually in Iowa, you know, they wanted to hire a travel guy. And John Torchetti was the coach. He told me Minnesota is going to bring somebody in. And I said to Torch, I go, Torch, why don't I do it? Like, I've been with the team. I know all the spots we go to, and I know what we need. And he took it to Chuck Fletcher and Brent Flair and said, let Joe be the guy. And they were on board with it. And I give them full credit. It springboarded my career in a lot of ways. It put me a little bit more on the hockey ops side, which was certainly helpful as I continued to grow. It allowed me to make more money, which is certainly important in any walk of life. And it gave me a little bit of flexibility in the summer, where I was kind of, you know, I was doing so much during the year, and Todd Fredrickson, our team president in Iowa, was good about giving me that time in the summer to spend with the family. So I was calling games most times by myself. I'd say, you know, 76 AHL games, I was probably doing 55 to 60 on my own. That means pregame, postgame, intermission, all the interviews, the broadcast solo. I was doing all the team travel for the last 6 years I was in Iowa. So buses, flights, hotels, per diem, call-ups, reassignments, new player moves to town, finding him somewhere to live, helping his family get established, new hires on the equipment staff and the training staff. I became sort of a liaison between the business side and the hockey side. If we were going to do a jersey auction for the Iowa Wild or some type of promotion with the players, it was me that was taking it to the coaching staff and the players, trying to find guys, making sure they knew where to be, finding volunteers for charity events and stuff like that. And then I was still doing corporate sales and sort of overseeing the PR department in some ways. So,
oh, by the way,
not all the, you know, it wasn't all of that all the time, but for a giant bulk of the time in Iowa, it was me doing, you know, essentially these, I don't know, 3 jobs, whatever it was. So yeah, but again, like it was fun. I loved it. I was close to the organization on so many levels. I wouldn't change it for the world. We love Des Moines and such a great spot to be. And I'm really happy now to be here, have less on my plate, and be at the game's highest level, you know, watching guys that we grew up watching on TV, now being able to call their games and see some of these young players from Minnesota develop into the players they are now, because I've seen them in the minor leagues. I mean, Jared Spurgeon and I were in Houston together in 2010. So it's kind of come full circle in that regard, but it's been a hell of a ride so far.
This is the Sieve and the Scribe, presented by Minnesota Hockey Magazine and State Farm Insurance agents Eric Means and Andy Hedlund. We're going to have more with Wild Joe Radio after a message from our sponsor.
Sports fans, come on down to Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub for one of the best dining experiences around. Great food, an awesome staff, and amazing atmosphere is waiting for you just minutes from Xcel Energy Center on West 7th in St. Paul. Whether you're watching a game, attending a concert, or just out for a good time, Tom's is the place to be. Enjoy twofers during all live Minnesota Wild games, Viking games, and Packer games. Now serving breakfast on Sundays until 2 p.m. While dining, check out the collection of over 400 pieces of hockey memorabilia. Having a get-together? Let them cater your event. They have room for you in their newly remodeled back bar with extra parking in their brand new parking lot. It's Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub. Give them a call, 651-292-9916. That's 651-292-9916 to schedule your next event. And check them out on the web at tomreeds.com. And if you see Tom, don't mention Ken Dryden.
The Functional Neurology Center is a Minnetonka-based clinic staffed by a caring and progressive team of chiropractic neurologists who are experienced in treating post-concussion syndrome, chronic pain, dizziness, whiplash, migraine, and performance enhancement. They are the concussion doctors that you can trust for your comprehensive brain health in Minnesota and who have helped many local professional hockey players that include Mark Parrish, Brock Nelson, Zach Parisi, and Tyler Nanny.
The FNC combines innovative technological therapies with manual therapy to improve human function.
My name is Mark Parrish, and I played hockey for 15 years and professionally, and I had some concussions, some head issues. We heard about Dr. Schmo, and we're certainly glad I did, because the difference from not just session to session during the day, but from day to day has been drastic. And just with suffering from sleep depravity for years, the last 3-4 nights I've slept like a baby and slept again like I did before I had kids, for crying out loud.
You can find them online at thefnc.com.
So, Wild Joe Radio, you mentioned some of those guys that you've watched. Jared Spurgeon, you mentioned, he hasn't changed a bit, by the way, since 2010. He still looks 14 years old. I just thought of this, Kevin. This is one of my favorite stories from you on the road, Jared Spurgeon related, back in 2010 when he made his NHL debut in Calgary, right? Yep. Joe, have you heard this story of Kevin the first time he saw Jared Spurgeon? Kevin, I'll let you tell the story because it's brilliant.
Well, back then, Dan Terhaar was the TV voice of the Minnesota Wild, and we were good friends. And so we had, the Wild were going through a tough stretch. They had some injuries. They were losing games. They did not look like they were guaranteed a playoff spot. We're kind of at the midway point of the hockey season. It's cold as hell in Calgary, and Dan Terhaar and I decided to go to a late movie. So we're getting back from the movie theater close to midnight at our hotel in Calgary. And as we're approaching the hotel, this cab pulls up, and out of the cab looks like this little kid and this hockey bag and a bunch of sticks taped together. And I look at Terhaar and I said, well, this is strange. I said, that looks like they brought up someone from Iowa, but they've got the stick boy here, but they don't have the player. I said, they got some young kid here. I said, you never know what you're going to see this season, but I mean, the season looked like it was going pear-shaped. And so, we tuck in and we get ready for morning skate the next day, and we're over at the rink and we're just kind of gathering the notes. And I look at Terhaar and I said, well, son of a, you know what? I said, that kid is on the ice. That little kid we saw getting out of the cab who looked like he was 12 years old. He's on the freaking ice. He's one of our players. And so Terhaar and I are like, well, we started doing our homework and research who this little guy is, because Jared Spurgeon wasn't Jared Spurgeon at that point. And he played that night and frankly has never looked back. But I will never, ever forget, A, seeing him unload that cab at midnight in Calgary, and B, seeing him on the ice that morning thinking, well, how bad can this season get? And now here we are, 12 years later. He's one of the best defensemen in the league. He's going to go down in history as one of the best defensemen to ever wear a Wild sweater. And he's the captain of a team right now that looks like a cup contender. I guess if there's a lesson out there somewhere, don't judge a book by its cover.
So I will add this. So again, 2010, I'm at a team event for the Houston Aeros to start the year. You have to remember, Jared Spurgeon at this point has earned his way to the Wild organization through Traverse City, Michigan, development camp, Minnesota Wild camp. Like, they just kept bringing him back because they were like, this kid's a great player. So we're at a place called Pete and Shorty's in the suburbs of Houston, right by the Aeros practice rink. And I'm there to introduce the team training camp to the booster club and a couple of crazies. And I don't know anybody in camp because there's 50 guys. Like, I'm not going to waste my time. Sorry, I'm just not. When it gets to 20, now I'll start to figure it out, right? That was sort of my thought process. And I just have a roster with numbers. And I swear to you guys, and Dan, I might have told this before, I see Jared Spurgeon in there, and I think to myself, who brought their little brother? I'm like, somebody has a cousin or a buddy or a brother. Like, I didn't care. I wasn't upset. I wasn't like, how dare they? But I'm like, there's no place in my brain at that moment that this guy was a player on the Houston Aeros. Okay. 40 games later, maybe less than that, he's in the NHL, which I don't even know if I recognize how good he was playing then. I don't think I was nearly as in tune with what makes a good defenseman, who has a chance to get called up, what the coaches were thinking. But of course, as we know, he went up, never came back really until the playoffs. and helped the Arrows go to the finals that year. In fact, his injury during the Calder Cup final in 2011, a big reason why the Arrows probably didn't hoist the Calder Cup over Robin Leonard and the Binghamton Senators at the time. But I digress. Just to see Jared Spurgeon then, like the same thing as you, Gord. He's not a hockey player, let alone an NHL captain. Like, and he still looks the same. I look young. I'm 42. I still will occasionally get carded going places. I can't imagine that Jared Spurgeon doesn't get carded going to buy a 12-pack from his local gas station.
Oh, it's so good. It's 100%
And he's
true
the best person
as well. Yep.
Like I
Well,
still, when I see him, he says hello. Like, even though we haven't been together for these last however many years, he's still that same nice kid, humble kid, ask you how you're doing. Like, nothing has changed for him wearing the C and playing 600 games in the NHL. He's just a great person.
Beautiful wife, 4 kids, giant dog running around like you'd never guess. Looking at him, you think, oh, it's senior over at Edina High School. No, it's Jared Spurgeon, captain of the Minnesota Wild. Now, leading into the original question I was going to ask, Joe, just how much pride do you take in watching, especially this year? You look at some of the guys that you work with so closely down in Iowa that are having an impact on this current team up in Minnesota. Capo Kakinen, Brandon Duhaime, Nico Sturm, Connor Dewar now here of late. Guys that you have followed and worked closely with for the last 2-3 years, really making big impacts on one of the best teams in the NHL this season.
It's awesome, and it's what it's all about. And quite frankly, it's what the Minnesota Wild missed for so many years. The cupboard was bare. The first 5 years for the Iowa Wild really didn't even sniff the playoffs, especially the first 3 or 4 years. In fact, the second season Iowa was in the American League, it was the worst team in the AHL in about a decade span. Like, it was 49 regulation losses. There's not a lot of fruit on the tree when you're talking about that. The veteran players were great guys, but just didn't produce enough offensively. The young kids would have their bursts and their flashes, but they just weren't good enough. There were missed draft picks. There were guys that didn't pan out for whatever reason. And then you look at sort of that infusion of talent, because you had the Jason Zucker class, right, with Granlund, Zucker, Coyle, Brodin, Johan Larsson. They were all there in that lockout year, which I guess was the second to last year of the Houston Aeros. So like the 11-12 season, I think, was that lockout. But after that, there wasn't a solid group until really Joel Eriksson-Ek and Jordan Greenway. And those guys didn't spend a lot of time in the American Hockey League. A few games here or there. Luke Cunnin comes in, a few games here or there. But the last few years, the development process has been in place. You look at what Nashville has done with Milwaukee in the AHL, Detroit and Grand Rapids. I reference those teams because I see them. Even Dallas and Texas, Dallas and the Austin-based Texas Stars. You have to make your players earn it. And the Minnesota Wild done a good job signing undrafted college free agents, like in Nico Sturm. And they've done a good job hitting on their draft picks, and not so much the first round slam dunks, but Connor Dewar, 3rd round, Brandon Duhaime, 4th round, Capo Kakinen, 4th round. Those are the types of guys that help really build the organization out. I've loved to see them contribute. I'm so happy for all of them. They're great people. They've worked hard. When you spend a year or 2 or 3 in the American Hockey League, it will humble you, especially in Iowa where the travel's not easy. You're getting off the bus at 2 a.m. if you're lucky. That's the shortest trip. Most times at the Friday night game at home, you're driving to Chicago to play Saturday. You're getting off that bus at 3:30 in the morning. You're not getting into your hotel room and asleep till 4 a.m., and you're playing the next night. A lot of times, there's meetings, there's morning skate. I mean, it's not just you get 12 hours of sleep. Like, you're on less sleep. The meals aren't as nice. The hotels aren't as nice. Like I said, sometimes you're doubling up on a bus. Like, the Iowa Wild do it right. The Minnesota Wild give them the resources to do it right. But there's a certain level at the AHL that just doesn't reach NHL travel. I mean, you guys know that. So for these guys, you have to want it, where every night, there could be guys running around looking to take your head off in the American League. 3 games in 3 days. It's a grind. And for these guys to put in the work to improve their game and now to be contributing at the NHL level, it's awesome. Personally, for me, it's awesome. And I know for these kids, it's really rewarding as well.
And now we circle back to the team that we have. It's funny. We're privileged enough, guys, to be in that traveling party and to be out on the road and to be at practice every day and to get those conversations going with whether it's a member of the coaching staff or Billy Guerin. It seems like these guys are very upfront and open about the journey that is each season. When you talk to your relatives and your friends that aren't around the team and they ask you what makes this team different, I'm curious, Joe, what do you see? Because you, like you said, you've seen the bulk of these guys at the minor league level. And I watched the way this thing has kind of been meshed at the NHL level together and how this group, more than any other group I've been around, I've been, here since 2006, seems like they're on the same page. What do you see?
I see the same thing, Kevin. I see a group that they're all pointed in one direction. It's a team that feels like it has that, I don't want to say cocky attitude, but that confident vibe about them every night, no matter who's in the lineup, no matter what the score is. And I've really liked listening to Dean Evison talk a lot this year. And you can go back to day one of training camp, and he has given great insight to this team and their makeup, talking about from day one that vibe around camp, that it just had a fun feel about it and that everybody was sort of pulling the same rope. And then you listen to Dean talk after a game where, say, the Wild are down 2-0, they rally to win, which they've done a ton this year. And he says the coaches don't even go into the locker room at times, right? There's no big tirade at the first intermission. The players talk about it themselves, whether it's Marcus Foligno or Jared Spurgeon or Matt Dumba or Eriksson Ek or Cam Talbot. I mean, there's so many leaders, so many guys that have a voice in this dressing room, and I think that makes this team really unique. A lot of it's not being said, but if you read between the lines about what is being said with this team since day one of camp, there's a different feel than there has been in the past. You can draw your own conclusions as to why, but it seems like the team, they like each other, they know how they need to play to win, and they want to win. And I feel like, and coaches will tell you this at any level, coaches coach, they do their thing. The leaders have to then take that message and make sure everybody else is getting it, because nobody wants to hear the coach 24/7. You need the guys in the room to say, all right, this is enough. We turned over too many pucks last period. Let's get our act together and get to work on the forecheck or whatever the message is. And this team does that. They check themselves. They police themselves. And it seems like there's no egos. And everybody, again, they like each other. Winning hockey will help with that, certainly. But when the times have been tough this year, there's been no panic. There's been no finger pointing. They just figure it out. And I think, to me, that's the biggest thing. It's like, you can't point to just one player or one moment or one game with this team. You could name 10 guys and probably leave somebody off as to why this team's been successful.
Wild radio voice Joe O'Donnell here on the Sieve and the Scribe, presented by Minnesota Hockey Magazine and State Farm Insurance agents Eric Means and Andy Hedlund. Now, we brought her up earlier. Your wife, Kara, you have 3 sons. We need to give them some props because you are doing this interview. I'm doing it from the comfort of my home in Western Wisconsin. Kevin is doing it somewhere near his home in his car. You, unfortunately, Joe, spend a lot of time away from home. You're doing this from the office. You get to go home today here as we embark on the All-Star break for a few days. You spend so much time away from them. I know, the boys are in school right now. They're going to move up here to the Twin Cities after the season's over, and that'll be fun. But just talk a little bit about your family and the support system that you have and just your amazing wife. And I called her a saint earlier, and that's probably underselling her just a little bit.
I'd agree with that. I was shaking my head there and had that look on my face for those viewers because she hates anything that has to do with getting her tires pumped. So I will tread lightly here just because if she ever listens to this, I don't want to be in the doghouse.
She'll listen. I'll be sending it to her.
She's the best, man. I couldn't be more thankful for the support from her. She literally has never said anything about moving, the time I'm away. There's never anyone, when I get home later today, it won't be like, you have to do A, B, and C because you've been gone. Literally never. It's hard for me to put into words just how much she's meant to our family because there's just not enough time to describe it all. I mean, to have 3 boys at home, in a normal season to be on the road half the time. But in this type of year to be, home games or road games for me because the family's still in the burbs there in Waukee, Iowa, finishing out the school year. I mean, they're all playing sports. There's nights where she has to drop a kid at one rink, drive to the other rink, drop a kid, go back, pick up the first kid. The boys are very supportive. I mean, they love the fact that, I think they're starting to get a grasp of what I do now as they've gotten older, and they're Wild fans. So that's been fun. Like Jake, our oldest, is 11. He's telling me things, like the morning after he's watching YouTube highlights or the game recap and be like, Dad, why did, like, for example, Kaprizov gets drilled in Boston. He was livid that there was no suspension on that play. So that part's cool that the kids they're all in on it. They love the Wild. Can't wait to get them up here to the state of hockey. But yeah, Kara, my wife, is she's as hardworking and is dedicated to keeping our family on track and doing everything for the kids as anyone can imagine. She's the most selfless person I know. And we just, we get along great, man. We've been best friends for a long time, and I could not have done this without her. It's not even close.
Well, let's play a little game here, Joe. Let's just pretend All-Star Weekend, you and your wife were lucky enough to get to travel out of town. And you had to pick one Wild player that you would let babysit those 3 kids for 4 days, and one that would be the last on your list. And I need reasons why for both.
Okay, I'm going to go. I know he doesn't. I should probably take somebody with children, that would make the most sense. But I'm going to say I'm going to actually go off the map here and go with Nico Sturm, because Nico Sturm is one of the most responsible, hardworking young men I've ever crossed paths with. His rookie year in Iowa, I remember telling him 5-10 games into the year that I'd never seen a first-year player approach the game the way he did. His pregame routines, his stretching, his rolling out. You might call him crazy, but he's dedicated to the craft. So I know he's responsible. I know he's a mature guy, and so I think he would make sure that the kids come back. When we would return, all their limbs would be intact. Obviously, I could go with a guy that's got kids like Foligno or John Merrill or Spurgeon, who we talked about. But I'll go off the board there, a guy with no kids, and say Nico Sturm. I'd be confident leaving the family with, the kids with. Let me see on the other side. I love this guy to death, and you guys are going to get a kick out of this, but there's no way I would leave the kids with Jordan Greenway. All right. Now, they would have a blast. They would eat a ton of pepperoni pizza, although I believe he takes the pepperoni off, is what I understand. Is that true, Dan?
Yes. He likes the pepperoni grease on the cheese pizza.
They probably play some video games. The kids would be most happy with Jordan Greenway, probably, because they would play video games, eat a ton of pizza, and just chill. But I don't know what the house would look like when we got back.
Great answers.
Well, we discovered yesterday that Matt Boldy is now living with Jordan Greenway, so they would have a roommate there if you decided to go that route.
I'm going to pitch this. I don't know if it will get approved, but I want Wild Amplified, and I told you this, Dan, to go spend a couple hours over at the Greenway condo with Boldy there, and it's one of Jordan's buddies also lives with him. So I don't want to call him a random dude. He's Greenway's friend, but I think that would be a really cool episode of Wild Amplified, is to sit down there. I don't care if they play video games or whatever, but just I need to see that dynamic there with Greenway, now Boldy, and whoever Greenway's friend is that lives with him in this condo in Minneapolis. I think that would be great content for their fan base.
Well, you're going to be in a race with Wild.com, because I think Wild.com wants to write that story as well. Joe, thank you so much for your time today. We got to do this again at some point. There's plenty of stories from the jungle, as you like to call it, that we need to delve into at some point. Hopefully a nice long playoff run. We'll get you back on here on the Sieve and the Scribe soon.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think that sounds like a good podcast name, actually, Stories from the Jungle.
There you go.
I might have to copyright that, start a podcast. But yeah, thanks, guys. Keep up the good work. Appreciate you having me on. Really thrilled to be here. And everybody's been so welcoming in Minnesota, and the organization's been great to me for so long. This has been it's been a thrill this year, and I hope the fan base has been enjoying the broadcast work and all that other stuff that goes with it, because this team's fun to watch and makes my job easy.
One of the best, Wild Joe Radio, Joe O'Donnell here on the Sieve and the Scribe, presented by Minnesota Hockey Magazine and State Farm Insurance agents Eric Means and Andy Hedlund. We'll be right back as Kevin Gorg and I put a bow on the show after a message from our sponsor.
The Sieve and the Scribe want to thank one of our founding sponsors, Tim Cortez Studio, for supplying the artwork for our podcast. Cortez is a famed artist and former Gopher goaltender whose work is prominently displayed on the exterior of Duluth's Heritage Sports Center in a series of 20-foot by 34-foot banners representing commitment, dedication, courage, honor, hard work, teamwork, integrity, and sportsmanship. Check out his art at www.timcortez.net. That's TIMCORTES.net, or follow Tim Cortez Studio on Facebook, where you can find commission work for the United States Hockey Hall of Fame and the UMD Bulldogs championship teams. Email timcortezstudios@gmail.com for more information.
Hey, pal, you already know that CrankyApe.com is the coolest auction site on the web for everything that rolls, floats, or has an engine. But did you know we'll also sell your toys for you? Why deal with sketchy characters, tire kickers, and no-shows when you can have the ape do it? It's a heck of a lot easier, and if you're not built like me, a lot safer too. Just go to CrankyApe.com and click on the blue burst. I'll take it from there. CrankyApe.com. Why monkey around anywhere else?
There he is, Kevin. Joe O'Donnell from the Wild Radio Network. I've been telling you ever since he joined us, he mentioned it a couple of years ago, he kind of mixed in some part-time duties, that he would be an absolute awesome addition to our Wild traveling party. He's one of the best, isn't he?
He is. And, you know, he's worked so hard to get here, but he's such a rube. And it's a great combination, right? I mean, guy's earned it. He's terrific at his craft, but there's no ego. And behind the scenes, he just wants to watch sports and go have a wheel and just hang out, which is what you're hoping for in that spot. And we're lucky to have him. He's going to be here for a long time. I love the way he does his work. I love the passion he brings to the table and how much he loves the gig. He's just a wonderful dude. So, yeah, great to have him on. And we're just getting started. Like you said, I anticipate we're going to have a nice long run through the playoffs. We have to circle back with Radio Joe and do this again.
Yeah, you got to appreciate a guy who he was not given this job at the Wild. He earned every bit of it for, we didn't even get into some of the stories that he's had earning his way to the National Hockey League. So we'll put a bow on this show here quick, Kevin. Couple quickies to close. Minnesota coming off a 5-0 win at the United Center against Chicago to close out the first half last night. TNT was doing the game. You were, of course, watching at home because you and I were texting back and forth during the game. What were your sort of thoughts from afar as Minnesota closed out the first half with a triumphant victory at the United Center and goes into the All-Star break here on a 10-game point streak, going 9-0-1 during that stretch?
Yeah, the Wild should feel pretty good. You're missing two key guys in Dumba and Foligno last night. Not just key guys on the ice, but heart and soul guys off the ice. And you knew 3 times within 10 days playing Chicago, you had beaten them twice. You knew they're going to come out with an edge to their game. They came out, they were physical, they were intense. And what I love about the Wild is they are able or capable of playing at a high level in so many different ways. They can play the speed game. They can play the physical game. You want to get in their face and try to intimidate them. They're not going to back down. I like their response last night. I like the way they just seemed to get better as the game went on. 0-0 after 1. Go out there in the second period and make it happen. And they did. All the right players making big plays. I think the key play in the game was the Zuccarello to Kaprizov. That, to me, kind of sent the message like, okay, we're done messing around here. We're going to take you out for a little woodshed beating. And they did it. And I love the way this team has been able to take care of business here in the first half of the season. It's hard to believe we still have another half to go. It feels like we should be further along. But let's enjoy it. You know, enough of this Minnesota negativity that's out there. Enjoy the fact that you've got a cup contender. You've got half a season to develop your young guys. And look forward to this team at some point getting to the end of the year in April, playing like they are now, maybe even better, and having that depth to make a run at a Stanley Cup. It's been a long time coming in Minnesota. This team sure feels like that type of team, and I'm just going to enjoy the ride. I'm looking forward to the All-Star break, but I'm really looking forward to those final 41 games and see what this team can do.
You know, the fun part for me is even in games where Minnesota's lost this year and lost in regulation, it's been few and far between because Minnesota's won 28 times in 41 games so far, 10 regulation losses this year. They're still entertaining. Like, the games are still good. And we've seen plenty of games years past. You and I have watched a lot of this team over the last 10, 15 years. And, there's some games where they just frankly haven't been very competitive. And that game, when you think back, Joe mentioned it in our interview with him, that game against Washington, where they're down 9 regulars. That might have been a game in the past where, frankly, just sort of mail it in, you write it off, and you have that built-in excuse as to why you're not going to be competitive. And this team just doesn't have that. And last night would have been another perfect example. Last game before the All-Star break, they put themselves in a position in the Central Division where, they're going to be right there at the very end. Couple key guys out that wear letters that aren't playing. Would have been real easy to just say, all right, you know what, we've had a good half, we'll write this one off. And they just refused to do it. And it was strange last night. And maybe I have, these visions of Kane and Taves and Patrick Sharp and Corey Crawford, still in my head from years past. It was strange watching Minnesota just absolutely skate circles around that Chicago Blackhawks team last night. I was dead wrong on Chicago. I thought they were going to be a contender in the Central Division this year. And for one reason or another, they've struggled from the gate, and they just have not been able to recover. But at the same time, credit Minnesota for putting the pedal down and not giving a team like that any hope last night.
Yeah, it's amazing. Take the Hockey Day game at home out of the equation, and there have been 2 games in Chicago now in the last 2 weeks, and it's been a house of horrors for this team for the past decade plus. And in these 2 games, the Wild have dominated. They skate circles around the Chicago Blackhawks, and in both games, they chase out a soon-to-be Hall of Fame goalie in Marc-Andre Fleury. It's got to be very satisfying for this team and this coaching staff to see the development of this club, to be missing 2 key guys and to go out there and play the way they did with that swagger last night. I think Joe hit the nail on the head. There's a quiet confidence to this group, from Dean Evison to Bill Guerin to the assistant coaches to the training staff, that's all the way through the players. Not one bit of ego, not one bit of I want the headlines, but there's a quiet confidence about this team. And when people ask me what the it factor is with this group, that's what I point to. Like, they are confident that every single night they will find a way to win the game when it matters most. So if they get down a couple goals, they're down a few players, it doesn't seem to deter from their work ethic, which has been terrific. And to me, that's what makes a championship team.
Wrote about this in the post-game hat trick last night, just sort of a status check here as we go into the All-Star break. Minnesota currently 3rd in the Central Division, but those numbers very deceiving. The Wild's played the fewest games of any team in division. Colorado right now atop the Central. They are red hot. Somehow their home winning streak ends at the hands of the Arizona Coyotes a couple nights ago. But Colorado in first place with 68 points through 44 games. Nashville with 60 points through 46. Minnesota slots in here with 59 points. One point behind Nashville, but 5 games in the hip pocket for Minnesota. The Wild 2 points ahead of St. Louis with 3 games in hand. 11 points up on Dallas with 2 games in hand. 16 points up on Winnipeg with 1 game in hand. Chicago and Arizona at this point, non-factors in the Central Division race. But Minnesota, Kevin, as we think about the first half as a whole here, has put itself in a really, really strong position to have a special season. Now, whether they're able to catch Colorado, we don't know. That series between the Wild and Avalanche has been dominated in recent years by the home teams. Minnesota has 2 games left at home against the Avs. They have a couple games in hand, so we'll see. But overall, Minnesota in a very strong position right now.
Yeah, they're in a good position. They've got the depth, and they don't need to have home ice to have success. If it ends up being you have to go through Colorado to get where you want to go, I don't think this team will be one bit intimidated by going there. We saw that a couple weeks ago in a Martin Luther King holiday special afternoon game at the Ball Arena. This team will play wherever you want them to play, and they'll play well. So it's exciting to kind of look forward to it. It's such a good division. You're going to have to play a quality team in St. Louis, Nashville, or Dallas in that first round. But like I said earlier, there's a quiet confidence about this group. There's enough depth where they can handle some COVID situations or injuries here in the second half. And my only hope is that they're healthy in April and that they can finish that final month with everybody ready to go and make a little bit of a run here, because to me, they're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the National Hockey League. And I've seen basically every team now at least once. This team looks like they're as good as anybody out there, Dan. Now, they're going to have to work to get there. You're going to have to get some breaks and certainly be playing your best hockey when it matters. But when's the last time, and I've only been doing this since '06, but when's the last time you could sit here in early February for the All-Star break and say that the Minnesota Wild legitimately should be one of the 3 or 4 favorites to win a Stanley Cup? This is rarefied air, and we're going to have to enjoy this because we have all the right pieces in place. We've got superstars that are producing. We've got good depth. We've got a great coaching staff and a GM that's going to make the right choice. That's the one thing. I trust Bill Guerin here at the deadline, whether it's to sit on his hands or to make one subtle or 2 moves. I trust that he'll make the right move.
All right, couple quickies here to close with Kevin. All-Star Game this weekend in Las Vegas. It's on Saturday. Skills competition is on Friday. Does the All-Star Game and the skills competition do anything for you?
It's not real hockey. I think, when I look at professional sports, the only All-Star Game that really looks and feels like its real game is baseball. The others are really, to me, hard to mimic the intensity that the defense brings. That being said, the fact that we've got Kaprizov and Cam Talbot there, I want to watch. And I'll point to Kaprizov first and foremost. Whether it's last night when I'm on my couch watching the game or whether I'm at the rink traveling with the team like we always do, I'm mesmerized by number 97. Every time he's on the ice, I want to watch and see what he does. And so with this All-Star Game, for him being his first All-Star Game, probably first of many, I will tune in, and I'll be very intrigued to see what it looks like with Kirill Kaprizov a part of the festivities. And for Cam Talbot, too, I mean, it's a thankless position to play in this game as a goaltender. He knows that going in. But for a guy at 34 years old to get this opportunity to bring his family out there, good for him. He's a terrific, terrific human being and a great goaltender. And so I think for us as Wild fans, we can certainly celebrate both those 2 guys.
Cam Talbot, 34 years old, making his first All-Star Game. Really cool story there. We'll have something certainly on him on Wild.com regarding his past as an Alabama Huntsville Charger, Kevin, not a traditional path to the National Hockey League, much less the All-Star Game. More Alabama Huntsville Chargers in the All-Star Game this year than Golden Gophers and Fighting Sioux/Fighting Hawks combined. Your thoughts?
Hard to believe, but if you live long enough in sports, the one thing I know is you'll see it all. And here's another situation where you have to see it to believe it, but here we are. Go Huntsville, go Cam Talbot.
And Wyatt Russell, by the way, this is one of the stories. This is the story I'm actually working on right now. His goaltending partner down in Huntsville will be a part of the skills competition on Friday. Now, you say, who the heck is Wyatt Russell? Well, he has some famous parents. Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn are his parents. I don't know if you knew that or not. Kurt Russell, part of a little movie called Miracle, among others. But Wyatt Russell, their son, that's one of the reasons why Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn are such big hockey fans. Their son played hockey and was teammates with Cam Talbot. So there will actually be 2 Alabama Huntsville Chargers taking part in the All-Star Game festivities. Real quick, Kevin, predictions on the game. I'm going to rattle off the rosters here. You let me know who you like among the 4 divisions. You ready? And this is as of Friday. Hopefully we have no more COVID clips like we had with Alex Ovechkin yesterday. The Metropolitan Division features Sebastian Aho from the Hurricanes, Claude Giroux from the Flyers, Jake Gensel from the Penguins, Jack Hughes from the Devils, Evgeny Kuznetsov from the Caps, Chris Kreider from the Rangers, who amazingly has like 1 million goals this year. Tom Wilson is the Alex Ovechkin replacement, Adam Pelech, Zach Werenski, Frederic Anderson, and Tristan Jarry between the pipes there. They will face off against the Atlantic Division in round 1. Patrice Bergeron, Jonathan Huberdeau having just a remarkable season for the Florida Panthers. Dylan Larkin, our guy, the Detroit Red Wings, captain Austin Matthews, Steven Stamkos, Nick Suzuki, Brady Tkachuk, Rasmus Dahlin, and Victor Hedman on the blue line, and then Jack Campbell from the Maple Leafs and Andrei Vasilevsky in goal. Who do you like there from those Eastern Conference divisions?
I'm going to go with the Atlantic. I think they've got the younger legs as I listen to you rattle off the roster. And I'm anti-Tom Wilson in all situations, so I will pick the Atlantic.
Fair enough. Now we'll go to the Western side. I'll say the Pacific Division first. Leon Draisaitl from the Oilers, Jordan Eberle from the Krakens, Johnny Gaudreau from the Flames, Adrian Kempe from the Kings. Jonathan Marchessault from the Knights was a late add yesterday. I'm guessing they're going to have someone that maybe steps out. There was kind of mysterious reasons as to why they added him. They haven't removed him, anyone yet, but I get the feeling someone may bow out of the game. Connor McDavid from the Oilers, Timo Meier from the Sharks, Mark Stone from the hometown Vegas Golden Knights, Troy Terry having a great year, the former Denver Pioneer for the Anaheim Ducks, Alex Pietrangelo, the only defenseman on that group, by the way. Petro going to be playing a lot of minutes back there, or they're going to be going with 3 forwards, which is always fun in 3-on-3. And then the goaltenders, John Gibson from the Anaheim Ducks and Thatcher Demko from the Vancouver Canucks. Now, from the Central Division, this is the most entertaining Central Division roster I can remember, Kevin. This has always been a team that I think has trended older, maybe a little slower. This year, I think the Central Division has a real chance to win. Kyle Connor in Winnipeg, who's absolutely one of my favorite players in the league to watch. Alex DeBrincat having a great year for Chicago. Nazem Kadri having a career year, and what timing he will be a free agent at the end of this year. He's making himself a lot of money with Colorado. Kirill Kaprizov, of course, we know him. Clayton Keller from the Arizona Coyotes. Jordan Kyrou, Minnesota fans remember him from the Winter Classic, had an outstanding game. He's having a breakout year. Joe Pavelski, the old man of the group, he will captain the Central Division. Guy just keeps on going with the Dallas Stars. An unbelievable career for the former Wisconsin Badger, the Plover, Wisconsin native, the captain of the Central Division team. Roman Josi and Cale Makar. For my money, the best defenseman in the league, Makar in Colorado. He is like Nathan McKinnon on skates. UC Sars and Cam Talbot will be the goaltenders. Really unfortunate, Kevin, that Nathan McKinnon will miss this game due to injury. I think you add McKinnon to that roster, and they have just as good a chance as anyone. But still a Central Division team that should be very, very entertaining to watch. A small part of me wishes Matt Zuccarello was playing just to see what him and Kirill Kaprizov could do on a league-wide stage. Your thoughts on the Western Conference teams?
Yeah, I think you have to favor the Pacific because they've got Draisaitl and McDavid, and with McKinnon out of the lineup, that is a huge void. I too wish Zuccarello was going to be there because I think Kaprizov, as good as he is all by himself, is just that much better when Mats is on the ice. So I'm going to pick the Pacific with my head, but my heart will be cheering for my boys with the Central.
You have to think Kaprizov's got something up his sleeve, don't you? Just the kind of guy he is. And we chatted with him, earlier this week, and he was kind of, shy.
Coy.
Like
Coy.
He's got something up his sleeve. He's a guy that, we've talked about it with him for a long time. The Wild hasn't ever had a player like Kaprizov when it comes to these league-wide spotlight games. There's something about those games that brings out the best in stars. We've seen it for years with a guy like Patrick Kane and Crosby and McDavid, and Kaprizov has that. No
question. He'll have a trick or two up his sleeve. It's a bummer that Ovechkin's not going to be here at the All-Star game because I know that would mean a ton to Kirill. But on this stage how much he's going to enjoy being out there. He'll have something special planned. He'll probably have a backup plan or two, and he'll probably get it done because that's the one thing I've seen now for a little over a calendar year from this kid. You never doubt him. The kid is remarkable, and I still think there's some more upside. I mean, he's such a special player, and I love that we got him on this stage.
Just looking at the NHL.com story, by the way, Kevin, that previews this game, there's pictures of 3 players at the top, and Kirill Kaprizov is one of them. So if there's any question about where he lands in terms of a league-wide view, he is certainly putting himself on there at something that's very deserving, something that we've watched here now for a year. Going to be a lot of fun this weekend at the All-Star Game. If you want to watch it, it's on ABC, 2 o'clock on Saturday. The festivities will begin there. I will be taking off for Las Vegas here in a couple hours. We got plenty of good stories coming up on Wild.com featuring Cam Talbot and Kirill Kaprizov. That's going to do it for now. Kevin, any closing thoughts?
Well, just enjoy Vegas. Both of us love that city, love all the people watching and the opportunities that are in front of you. Enjoy it. I'd like a lot of updates via text, maybe some odds on Cam Smith to win the Masters. You can shop around and get me something close to 35 or 40 to 1. I'd like to enhance my my pocketbook here come April, but no, just enjoy the festivities with 2 Wild players, one a veteran making his All-Star debut and one that's going to be there for a long time in number 97.
Plenty of text messages coming from the sports book later today for sure. Maybe some Venmo transactions and some side wagers being placed as well. Thank you, Kevin. The Sieve and the Scribe, presented by Minnesota Hockey Magazine and State Farm Insurance. Thank you so much to agents Eric Means and Shakopee and Andy Hedlund and Rogers for sponsoring the show. I am Dan Myers from Wild.com. Kevin Gorg, thanks again from Valley Sports North. Zach Halverson does an amazing job.
Way to go, Halvey.
Our producer. And special thanks again to Wild Radio voice, Joe O'Donnell. By the way, if you haven't listened, the Olympics are starting right now. The women's hockey is starting right now. We chatted with U.S. Women's Olympic coach Joel Johnson last week. I know it's a week old, but plenty of relevant information. If you're looking for an Olympics primer, go check that out. This has been episode 6 of the Sieve and the Scribe. We'll talk to you next week with episode 7.
Dave's Sports Shop in Fridley, Minnesota, the top hockey shop in the North Metro since 1969. Specializing in custom fit hockey gear, top quality skate sharpening. We've got a full lineup: CCM, Bauer, Sherwood, True, Vaughn, and many more. We also offer used and new skates. We'll take those old skates in on trade for your new skates. Dave's Sports Shop, where the winners shop. Come find out why. Mention this ad to get your free skate sharpening.